I saw a movie last week that ended in such a way that it just triggered something in me, and I thought, ooh, I really like that. I like that. I've heard that statement hundreds, dozens of times at least, and it's just become a part of the English language. We say it all the time together. The movie was The Martian, and it was really something. It was like a modern day Robinson Crusoe in a way, except that there was no Friday in it. It was the guy was all alone by himself on Mars. And he was so resourceful. He figured out a way to live and how to stay alive. And I won't spoil any more, but I just will say this, that at the very end, he says to a group of people, he says, if you reach a point in your life where you think that that it's over for you, rather than just giving up and allowing the thing to just overtake your mind in panic and so forth, just simply stop and figure out what's the first thing that needs to be done for survival and do the math. That's what he said. Do the math. We've heard this so many times now in the past 10 years or so. Do the math. Just do it. Oh, do the math. Now, he took this in two senses, or at least I heard. What I heard was in two different realms. One was in this literal realm. Do the math, because he had to sit there and figure out, okay, I got marooned here on the planet. Something happened to him, and they thought he was dead in this terrible storm, so they had to leave the planet because of the rest of the team, and they left. They left Mars, and they started heading home, and they cried over his death, and they were just so sorry, and the leader of it, she thought that it was all her fault, and just all the emotions that you can possibly think of that they went through, and they were saying, don't blame yourself, you did what had to be done, you saved the crew, and so they took off and they left. He wakes up after the sandstorm is over, and he's not dead, he's been punctured by it, but he's still alive. So then he has to sit there and figure out how to stay alive, and his first feeling about it all is, well, what's the point in this, because they're gone. I don't have any way to get back home or anything. But he starts doing the math for survival. He goes in and he looks through all in the little ecosphere that they had established there as a base. He goes through and he finds how much food is left. He goes through there and finds out what's available for him, and he lays it all out there and he counts it and how many days, because there was enough food there for 6 people, and now he's all alone, so he's got 6 times as much food, and so he starts figuring it out. Then he figures out the math of how long it would take for, if he could contact Earth, how long it would take for them to get a mission together and send somebody back. Or when is the next mission going to start, because they were mission number 3, and there was already a scheduled mission number 4, but it wasn't for quite some time away. But if they sped things up, could they possibly get back? And so as the show progresses, as the movie progresses, it's just an absolute wonder to see how the human mind, this man's human mind, takes over. Fortunately, he's a biologist, and he figures out how to grow food, and just one wonderful thing after another happens there. I won't go into that, but the do the math part that hit me was not only did he do the math of how long it would take and how many days did he have to survive and how could he make that stretch, and could that math possibly come together? The amount of days that he could stay alive, and the amount of days it would take for this return to save him, to capture him, recapture him, and take him back. And the math didn't work really well, so he had to keep coming up with new solutions all the time. Now I thought, okay, that's wonderful. He did the math, he did the calculations that were necessary for this. He was very resourceful in all ways, and he's a scientist, a biologist, and so he was able to survive for quite some time. Now, for each one of us, there is some math that we do as well. But it's not necessarily calculations of arithmetic or something. It's the math we do every day when we are talking to ourselves in our minds. There is a story that Natasha reminded me of. I hadn't thought about this in a long time, about 2 Jabbas, as she calls them, what we call them frogs. That's interesting, isn't it? Java and frog. So she calls it Java, and there's two frogs, and they somehow stumble off and land in a pail of milk, of whole milk. You know the story. She reminded me of the story. The story is that one of them just says, "We're going to drown in here. I'm done for," and just croaks. So then the other one just kicks like crazy and kicks like crazy, turns the pail of milk first, turns the cream that's in the milk into butter, and it becomes solid, and then he hops out. So there is always some kind of answer if you're doing math. The math in this case is keep moving forward, keep moving forward, keep moving forward, keep kicking, keep moving. All of us have learned to do that. We're all survivors to some degree. We all survive in some way. Each one of us has been hit with our sort of marooned feeling, like we're on a planet all by ourselves, and that anybody that was with us before has left and gone on in life, and there we are just by ourselves. And we have to sit for a moment and think, how am I going to survive this, or am I just going to just roll over and be done? It's just going to end. You know, it's not that easy. I don't know if any of you have ever tried this in your own life, but to just lay in bed and not do anything and just wait for the end, it doesn't come. Eventually you get hungry, or you have to, some kind of bodily function takes over or something, and you have to get up and move. I'm reminded of another movie called Little Big Man, when grandfather in the Lakota tribe decides this is the day he's going to die. And so he crawls up on one of the, they have those stilted beds very high in the air for the body to lay there. He crawls up there and he lays there. And while he's laying there, and he's laying there, and he's laying there, waiting for death to come, because he's just sure that this is the day he's going to die, it starts to rain. And at first he's laying there and he sees we see a drop of water hit his face, and we see another one hit, and then they come a little bit more, and a little bit more. Pretty soon the rain is just coming down in buckets. So he gets up and crawls down from there. And he says, evidently this was not a good day to die. And he moves on with life. He moves on with life. And that's kind of the way each of us are. We get to these situations, we think we're just left behind. We're all alone. And then something occurs in our lives that makes us say to ourselves, it's really not that bad. If I just start moving and doing something about it, maybe things will work themselves out. And we, as I said, in this case, I'm borrowing that phrase and using it in a different way. We do the math. We do the calculations required for us to survive in life. Now here's one that comes to us very often. I'm going to tell you this story I heard on NPR yesterday. It shocked me when I heard it. This man was talking about how we go out of our way to take care of our physical hygiene, that even a small child knows that it's necessary for physical hygiene. And he gives the example of a child who sees cookies up on a shelf, pushes a chair up there, crawls up to get the cookies, makes a mistake, steps off the chair suddenly and scrapes his knee or her knee on the edge of a drawer and creates a cut. Sees the cut, immediately takes the chair, goes into the medicine cabinet, and crawls up in the medicine cabinet and opens it to get a Band-Aid. Suddenly all that cookie stuff is out of the way. The necessary, and even a small child knows that when you have a boo-boo, you put a Band-Aid on it. You take care of it right then, because you don't want an infection to set in, and that's what mom does, and so that's what I'm going to do by myself. Takes care of it. Then he told this story. This woman goes online, and she meets this guy, and they really hit it off, and he appears to really like her, and he's interested in her, what he has to say to her. And they finally decide they're going to meet. So they go and they meet at a restaurant in a good, safe place. And they're sitting there, and about 10 minutes into their conversation, he suddenly looks at her and says, "I'm not interested. It's not clicking. I'm not interested." And he gets up and walks out. So as the story goes, she calls a friend, her best friend, and says to her best friend, "This is what happened to me." And the best friend says, "What did you expect? You have big hips. You're not very smart. What you have to say to people isn't very interesting. And all in all, you're just a loser. So what did you expect?" And then he shifts the attention and says, it wasn't really her best friend she was talking to. It was herself. It was herself she was talking to. When the crew left and headed home and left her on her Mars all alone, her first reaction was to condemn herself. And his whole purpose in his whole book is called Mental and Emotional Hygiene. The idea that we need to take care of ourselves and clean up things within ourselves. We need to do the math in a different way. We need to do it so that we aren't beating up on ourselves, but rather that we're understanding, that we're loving like we would be to anyone else, a best friend or whoever, and we should be encouraging ourselves. And that's one of the things this guy on Mars did. He encouraged himself. He did this, "I am the radiant life of God. I am, I am, I am." He did this. I am a survivor. I'm going to survive this. I'm going to get through it as long as I continue to do the things that are necessary for survival and think always in a very positive way. He does a couple of things in the movie, and please, I suggest you see the movie. But one of the things he does is he realizes that he's going to have to create some oxygen in this particular room because the oxygen is just too low and he can't get it any higher. So he figures out a way to put certain chemicals together, and he lights a fire, and when he does, boom, he explodes the room because he didn't figure in his calculations when he was doing his math. He didn't figure in the carbon dioxide in his own breath. And so because of not doing that, there was too much carbon dioxide in the room, and when he lit it, this thing goes off. That was a little bit more than I understand about science when he was doing that, the calculations for that, but it was, obviously it worked when once he redid the calculations. It was pretty funny too, to see him explode and his hair singe and everything. Doing the math for us in any situation, though, comes down to a sum that is often not the sum that we may be searching for. We may think that we need to put 2 and 2 together, or 5 times 5, or 16 times however many days, or whatever it might require for us to get in that good space to be able to survive whatever is going on. I need this much money to retire. I need to set aside this much money every week from my paycheck. I need to do all these things. Or if you're in a survival type mode and believe that the world is about to end, or that a great catastrophe is going to come someday, like some religions and so forth, you set aside so much food, so much water, and so forth, and you set all this aside. You make sure all your guns are loaded and so forth, and you take care of all these needs that you think you might need to survive this terrible cataclysm that's going to come, and you prepare yourself. You know, Jesus talked about this in one of his parables. He says that a man went out and made a harvest, and he put that all away in his barns, and he counted all of his animals, and he set everything aside just right, and he had himself set up for life. And he was so proud of himself for doing this, for doing the math, figuring out the calculations it was going to take for a wise and happy life, and then suddenly, on that very night that he finally got it all together, He died. And Jesus' point in all this is, you can do all that kind of math you want to do. But if you don't do the inner math, then you're going to miss out on what life is really, really all about. And so there is a conclusion to all this that we come to. No matter what sort of situation we find ourselves in, no matter what we see in politics or what we see in the world, what we see in the power struggles that exist, what we see in what might happen on the globe, global warming or so forth, we can always look within and come to one conclusion. And that conclusion is one. One. Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one. You are Israel. I am part of Israel. It means the children. We're all together. And the conclusion that we must always come to in the spiritual realm within us, which is directing all that's going on in the outer world for us, is this idea that there is no separation. There is only one. 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 There's not a one over there and a one over here. There is one collectively. Once we get that and we practice that and use that formula in every area and every aspect of our life, everything else works out pretty well. It really does. It works out well. So the next time you're in a situation where you feel like you're left behind on Mars, your own particular little Mars planet, that you're waiting for some outside source to return, to pick you up, to save you, to take you back home, remember this: wherever you are is home. Whatever situation you're in is the situation that you are in because you are one with God. Your spiritual existence is oneness. There is no separation. That's the illusion. That's the illusion that has been going on since the beginning of civilization. You can't really say time, but civilization. As long as people have been coming together and agreeing upon that which life holds for them, they've come to the conclusions collectively. This collective mind sees and believes in separation. This collective mind sees and believes in wars and contention. This collective mind believes that there is an other out there. But there is only one. Only one. When we see that, then all of this other falls away. And when it does, our ship comes. It takes us home. Or it comes and it joins us and says, we're all home. For each one of us, it requires spiritually that we do the math.